Real spirituality is getting to know the states of consciousness that are going to happen after the physical body has died, experiencing them consciously. And then once the physical body has died, there are multiple different paths that you could take, but being prepared for that and then having a choice of what to do. Now, there are multiple different paths. The most common path is, I mean, in a Kabbalistic context, on the tree of life, I don't want to go into too many details here, but there are three different paths essentially, right? In a Kabbalistic context, there's this the path of air, which is most commonly taken by people. And by the way, which path you take is solely dependent on your development before you die. So the first path that people take after death is kind of like this experience of where the different elements leave the physical body. Okay, so first it's the air element that leaves the body, so the breathing stops. Then it's the water element. Then it's the fire element, the temperature drops, and then eventually the earth element, which gives the body solidity, and it dissolves. Right now, during that process, at the end of it, or as it's happening, the remainder of the energy of the person, the remainder of the etheric body remains in the heart center, right, for another 3 days, and then there's a disconnection, and the person in the process of dying, or their consciousness as they're dying, experiences this as this tunnel of bluish gray light. I'm sure you heard many people talk about that stuff, right? It's like, I see the tunnel, somebody was calling me to the light. That's what they're all experiencing, right? Now they're in this tunnel that they're being pulled into. There are different experiences, but mainly they're going to experience the different reflections of their own consciousness. When a person has no mental training as they're alive, they have zero control of what is being projected out of their consciousness. And most people die without having any control over their consciousness, any real consciousness. So they're going to, in this tunnel and in this transition, they're going to experience the projections, their own fears, their own expectations and all that stuff, right? Then they're going to end up in some form of an afterlife that reflects their deep held beliefs, so heaven is real in that sense, hell is real. However, it's a temporary experience before they reincarnate. So the physical time frame of how long they stay in the afterlife is determined by how long the body still exists. Basically, if the longest time to preserve it would be something like mummification. And the ancient Egyptians intentionally mummified the body so that they wouldn't have to reincarnate and they could stay indefinitely in their specific afterlife. The Hindus, obviously, they want to come back right away, so they burn the bodies, right? And somewhere in between, our culture, we dig the bodies, and it takes around like 30 to 45 days, and then you will see a reincarnation of the soul. So they're very much connected. Now, those 30 to 45 days, if it's happening in the spiritual, which is outside of space and time, could literally seem like an eternity. Yeah. But the eternal part of the person will reincarnate into a new body based on what is necessary to balance out the soul and to give it the experience that is necessary right now. It's not consciously chosen at that point. However, one constant is that as the soul comes into more and more experiences and into more and more incarnations in different forms, it definitely grows in its understanding of consciousness, and eventually everybody hits a higher consciousness, a higher level of awareness, right? Those are the people that are more like spiritually inclined, right? And then there's a second path, which is rather similar to the first one, right? But the third one, the third path that is taken by most people who have had solid spiritual training as they were still alive, that leads to the ability to consciously choose your next incarnation and reincarnate with full memory, or you dissolve into different forms of existence. So if you don't want to return here, you have the ability or the opportunity to exist in different realms that are completely alien to what we're experiencing here, right? So in that context, the growth process leads you at one point to the understanding, and I think that's the same thing. I don't think I'm reaching here, because I think I've heard this from so many different people that I consider this like a common thing, where the person on their spiritual path begins to see their emotions completely as a tool. So leading your or using your desire, your desire in the moment as a navigation system is detrimental. Why? Because these emotions and desires are, to a large extent, survival mechanisms that pull you through pleasure, pain, and all of that stuff. And this is all part of the physical. You know, it's an extension of the survival mechanism of the physical body, which is very different from the source or the soul. You know, so at one point the initiate or even the adept, you know, which is probably a little higher, but the initiate must learn to completely change their emotions at will. This is part of magical training. You also have to be able to control your thoughts. It doesn't mean that you control your thoughts 24/7, but it means that if you want, you got to be able to redirect your mind and its activity. And now, if your mind, your emotions, and your experience of this world can be changed at will, now what are you then? Right? So you're not the thoughts, you're not the emotion, you're not the body. So what are you, right? So in the process of learning how to control all of those things, how to control the system, you become aware of a part of yourself that is eternal and that is just there. It's always a constant that is just experiencing through those different mechanisms, the emotions, the thoughts, and all that stuff, right? And this is the part that we need to identify with. As the adept becomes initiated into more and more levels, they no longer identify with the body. They no longer identify with the emotions nor the thoughts. They identify with that part which is constant, eternal, and that's the part which will move on into a new incarnation, you know. Now, from that perspective also, most limitations that exist are no longer there. So you can use this part to control things around you. You can use that part to remote view. You can use that part to enter different bodies. You can use that part to travel along different timelines. You can use that part to do interdimensional travel, all of that stuff. You can simultaneously exist in multiple reality frames. You can simultaneously, as we're having a conversation here, you could be on the astral and do a ritual there, you know. Like I would say any, maybe not any, but me personally, half of my day is not even spent here. It's spent on the other side, you know. And is it wasted time? Definitely not, because from there, I'm influencing things that are here. This is the dream. The physical world is the dream. This other world is real, or more real. I would even say the more subtle it gets and the more it is removed from the physical, the more it is actual reality. So the physical world is literally just a dream play now that can be programmed on the other side. So yeah, so my thoughts on that topic is not necessarily answer, because you didn't really ask a question that directly, right? But you made a point here. In my opinion, the emotions are really, really bad navigation systems. So we also have to make the distinction between intuition and emotions, because they're not the same thing. Emotions are things that ebb and flow and are how do I put it? They're literally just an extension of our survival mechanism. Okay, let's imagine you fall in love with a man, okay, with a guy. Your emotions will tell you it's a mechanism that tells you that this guy has good genetic material, and nature is telling you through those emotions, mate with that guy. All right. Mm-hmm. Now I know that doesn't sound very romantic, but that's at the bottom. That's what's going on, right? So your intuition is something completely different. Your intuition is something that is an instantaneous knowingness without any linear like coming up with a solution. You just know. And that's very different from emotions, because it feels very different. It's just a knowingness, really. It's just like, it's almost as if you're observing that effect that it is having on you. Whereas emotions make you like you're really engaged in those emotions, you know, and that's the difference. And very few people, coming back to the majority of people on this path, or that consider themselves on this path, very, very few people work with their mind so much that they actually can make those distinctions, because it takes a lot of introspection. It takes a lot of observation. It takes a lot of, awareness to discern between those things, so most people never even do that, which, I don't know how to put it, but we live in the physical world here. We live in Malkuth, and Malkuth is ruled by Saturn, and Saturn is the initiator, but also he's like he's hard but fair. He's mean but fair. So he requires us to do certain things, but if we do the work, we can reap the benefits and rewards.
Yeah.